think this is working properly now. We were having some technical difficulties. Y'all, let me know if you can see me. Sorry if you caught a minute before, but something really funky was going on this side with the video. But it looks like we have video. It looks like we have sound. It looks like I'm connected, so we can have our conversations. If you're catching this twice, hi, happy Tuesday. How are you? How are you enjoying summer? Tell me all the things. I feel like summer is that funny time of year where I lose track of what day of the week it is, and I lose track of what time it is because it stays light so long. But I've been enjoying summer here in the city. Summer in the city. I live in New York City. For those of you who don't know, I think it's not my favorite weather at all, but I really love the energy in the city. It's like the whole city comes alive. It's like everyone has been cocooned in the winter, and like the restaurants spill into the streets, and everyone just has this like very fun energy where it's like live up life, because we know the summer days are going to end and then it's going to be fall, which is personally my favorite. But it's just a very special, like, live life, embrace, enjoy life energy in the city that I particularly love. So I'm enjoying summer a lot. I hope you are as well. That's not what we're talking about today, but that's kind of what's going on over here. Today we are going to talk about, and I was laughing, I was saying this before, I was having some technical difficulties. I was laughing at the title that my team selected. I always pick our topics in advance, and I write a whole bunch of titles or subject lines that my team picks for me. And we went with how to manage your mind and thrive as a CEO when everyone else is losing their shit. And I'm just laughing. I'm laughing that I picked that as a title. And it's also the conversation I really want to have that I think is so important. We talked about this a little bit last year back in July when the original talk of a possible recession was coming up, and there's just a lot of fear mongering on social media, and I think it's just become really present again. I've been hearing this from a lot of clients. I've been hearing this from a lot of peers. We've talked a lot in this space about there's just things happening in our industry that are just changing the scope of the industry a little bit and the buyer's market a little bit. We are also just sitting in, it is true, there is inflation, and we were in a time of COVID a couple of years ago, and that changed our industry dramatically, and we're not in that time, but it has left an impact. And I think there's just a time where it's very confusing in our space, and I put this in the email I sent out. I think it's both louder and more saturated than ever. It's not in your head. It is saturated. That's not a bad thing. We're going to talk about that. But I do think it's freaking people out that it is just crowded. There's a lot of people who are doing the same thing and selling the same thing. There's a lot of people both telling you that you can make $1 million in a minute, and you're also seeing people lower their rates and telling you to freak out or telling you to recession proof your business. And I think there's just a lot of noise, and it's very easy to get wrapped up in the noise, easier than ever before. And I also think business is just in a different space in our online space in terms of marketing and sales than it was before. And I think that can be confusing and stressful. And I want to have this conversation because what I want for you is to understand what's happening and to be able to thrive during this time, as opposed to either adding to the noise or being someone who's kind of running around like Chicken Little saying the sky's falling in and essentially losing your shit. I say that joking around in the title, but I do think this is a time where if we don't know how to manage our mind and we don't understand what's going on, we don't have some practical plans in place, it can be a time where this can be very stressful for businesses, and it can cause harm to your business. Not to create a doomsday scenario, but I think it's an important conversation for us to have for that reason. My camera's doing that thing again, y'all. I apologize. I feel like I always have tech issues, but there's something going on with my camera that it's zooming in and out. I hope it's not on your end or making you dizzy. I might be a little fuzzy we can handle, but I hope I'm not creating dizziness. But if so, just listen to the sound, because I think this is an important combo. I'm gonna pull my notes up because there are a couple things I want to make sure I speak to. Let me first and foremost, before we dive into this conversation, let me just give the disclaimer that feels very important. I am not a financial advisor. I am not an economist. That is not my zone of expertise. I am not legally able to give you advice on your finances, on the economy. This is all coming from my personal experience. I have been in the business and in our online space for over 7 years. I've been in our online space for probably 8 years. I've been in business for over 7 years. I've also supported clients through, and I'm continuing to support clients through not just COVID and what was happening in the economy then, but now very successfully. My clients are thriving. My business is thriving. I'm very grateful for that, but we're in a very gratefully very sustainable place in business. And I put this in the email, but I've also written out other funky economies. When I was acting, there was a 2008 recession. We had a writer's strike at that time in the acting world, which meant that the whole industry shut down. And it was a time when people were definitely losing their shit. And I rode that wave very well. I was waiting tables at the time. I honestly killed it. So I just have a lot of experience with funky economies and great economies, and just observing myself and what's allowed me to thrive during those times instead of freaking out, and also just what I've seen to be supportive as a business owner in any economy. So just so you know where I'm coming from, I'm not an economist, I am not a financial advisor. Please don't take financial advice from me. You can definitely hear what I'm saying and see what feels true for you and apply it to you, but I'm legally not allowed to. Before we go any further, also, we're doing a giveaway. If you join me live, if you're here live, comment, say hi, give me an emoji, ask a question, you will be entered. We'll give away 1 copy of my self-study course. It's a workshop, Leverage Your Unique Money Blueprint. It walks through taking a look at your current relationship with money and the unhealthy expression of your relationship with money that's keeping you stuck, undercharging, under earning, overspending, leaving money on the table, and really how to rewrite that to a healthy expression, a healthy money blueprint. It seems very applicable here. So it's a workshop and an accompanying playbook, workbook that goes with it. We'll give away 1 of those. So I gotta do, say hi. Someone that's live, that's who we're gonna give it to, and we'll send that over to you. What we're going to dig into today and what I want to cover with you are a couple core things. So we're going to talk about how right now, what's going on in the economy and what is going on in our industry, how this is different than what we saw in our space during COVID. And of course, aside from the awful health repercussions, I know that was just such a challenging time it was just such a challenging time in so many ways. So I want to acknowledge that, but we're going to talk about this more from the industry economy and how it's different right now, and how to use this knowledge to support yourself in riding the wave that is kind of just going through our space right now. We're going to definitely talk about a reminder that according to Google, we aren't in a recession. There is definitely an inflation. I'm sure everyone is feeling that. But we're not in a recession, and why we want to talk about that, what we want to understand about a recession, why it's important to manage your mind. We're going to talk a little bit of economy 101, like this much. I promise I won't geek out on you too much, but there are a couple things. I shared this last year in last year's live, but I feel like it's important for us just to refresh that really quickly, because otherwise it's very easy to get into a doom scroll online, and that more than anything will create a self-fulfilling prophecy, and I don't want that for anyone here. And I think it's also helpful to understand a couple of these things. I think there can be a lot of safety when you knowledge is power, right? When you know certain things, there's so much safety when we know things. I know one of the money manifesting tips and tools is to check your account balances daily. And while yes, that can create a healthy relationship with money and that can be really powerful on the mindset manifesting side of things, I think there's also a very practical element to when you are taking a look at something, when you are not burying your head in the sand, when you're not scared of it, when you have the information, knowledge, data, right? There is so much power with that because you know what actions to take. You know what's true, what's not true, what's true for your business versus what everyone else is saying. You know what actions to either take to implement something, to put in place. You can see what's trends are coming up down the road. I think this is very helpful for you to know, so you can really treat your business like a business as opposed to just getting caught up on what everybody else is saying about the economy or the industry. I'm going to share with you my exact thought process I have around dips of any kind and how this is supporting me to thrive in multiple funky economies. And I hope that will be very permission giving for you and just an approach you can take right now. And then we're also going to talk just very briefly to some practical strategies, tips, tools that I will offer. Again, I am not a financial advisor. I am not an economist, but these are just some practical strategies I'm supporting clients with who are in all sorts of industries that we're talking about, and just some grounded business money talk that I think might be helpful that I just don't think we have a lot in our space. I think there's just a lot of, if you're stressed about money, how do you manifest $1 million? If the economy is doing something that we are all the exception to the rule and the unicorn, and if we, or if we manifest enough, we don't have to worry about things. And I don't want you worrying, I don't want you fear-mongering, but kind of what we were just talking about, sometimes practically looking at what's real can give us some practical solutions that will actually create real safety and practically allow you to manifest exactly what you need for financial success now and later. All right, just see if we have any questions. Throw them at me if you do. Let me know if this is valuable for you. I also like to know, this is the kind of stuff y'all like to hear about. I find this, I personally love to talk about this stuff, but let me know as we're having these topics too, what's the most valuable for you to hear. I know sometimes it's like, no, Kim, I just want to know how to book a client. Don't talk to me about economy stuff. But if this is valuable, let me know, because I know to keep doing more topics like this. We've got a cold brew day again today too, so we'll see how chatty Cathy I get around this. Just seen no comments. Great. Let's dive in here. So let's start with this first. Let's just talk about if you're sort of like, I didn't even know anything was going on in the economy, or I didn't even know anything was going on in our industry. This is new news, Kim, or like it does feel like something's going on. I just assumed, this is the same thing we were seeing during COVID, or I've been freaking out that there is a recession. Let's just have a reset and let's just talk about what is actually going on, how this is different from COVID, kind of like what's happening here, and then we'll do the real quick, just a real quick economy 101 so that we can understand, or economics 101 I should say, what a recession really means. So I think what is helpful to understand is during COVID, and again, I know COVID is a tough topic for so many people. I lived in New York City in the epicenter through it, so my heart goes out to anyone who had a hard time, whatever that looked like there. It was, I know how real that was. And in some ways it feels so close for all of us and also like so far removed for so many of us. And I know everyone had a different experience depending on where you're living, if you had kids at home, not kids at home, where you were at in your business. But what we saw in our industry and in the online space during COVID, because globally we shut down, we saw a massive influx to everyone going to the online space. Now, of course, the economy and businesses were doing funky things because all supply chains were cut down, right? And because my restaurant down the street had to adapt and had to pivot, but our online space actually saw a huge influx of business because every business that had never been online before was coming online, needed to figure out how to be online. And a lot of businesses that couldn't exist during COVID were figuring out how to thrive online. We're trying to figure out how to bring their business online. Everyone was trying to figure out how to be in the online space. So we saw a huge burst during, or a big bubble, right? A big influx and a big industry burst. And I was talking about this with a past client of mine who's a really successful multi-million-dollar business, and they saw massive revenue growth during COVID, and that's a beautiful byproduct of what we saw during COVID, right? For as much hard and suffering and pain and loss and just the difficultness that we all experienced in different ways during COVID, I think many businesses, I know my business, I think like doubled or tripled during that time, right? Her business, I don't exactly know what the numbers are because she wasn't on revenue share, but the numbers were really high during COVID. And one of the things we were talking about is her numbers are still really great, but it's no longer COVID, meaning that the need in the online space is a little bit different. And so what's happening, we're going to talk about what else is happening, but one of the things that I think is happening right now is we have to think about like, this is economics 101, supply and demand. So during COVID, we had a massive demand for services needs online. If you were someone who did fitness training and you used to do it in person, right? No one could go anywhere in person. I couldn't go to my gym across the street. There was a huge demand for that to be online. So we saw demand go up, and therefore there was a reason for more supply. Therefore, sales increase. A lot of people really, like, numbers increase. Many people had numbers that maybe they won't hit again, not because they suck or they're bad or there's something wrong with their business, but because literally supply and demand. And now if we think about that example, if I think about maybe there was a program I was spending, I don't know, was it Tracy Anderson? Anyone know that? It's like the ballet classes. I signed up for, not ballet, it's like in-home gym, I don't know. It's like elongating Pilates ballet type workout, right? So I was paying for that during COVID and running outside. But when COVID ended, not because the product sucked, but because I prefer to not work out in my home, I joined a gym across the street, right? What happened is the demand online went down, but the supply online stayed the same. So we had COVID happen, an influx of demand and need, and an influx of supply, but there was enough supply demand to meet up. A lot of businesses really boomed. Hopefully this is tracking. What's happened now is that we still have the supply, right? We just don't have quite the same demand in many cases because a lot of people are finding solutions offline, and also because what happened is so many people also transitioned who were never going to be online and stayed online. So it's just gotten more saturated. This is not necessarily a bad thing. I think in some ways it's great because a lot of things are moving online. I think a lot of people found ways to be more flexible, but just so we can understand, this is just a natural thing that's going to happen. And So for some people right now, what they're seeing is that they're not making the same sales as they were a couple of years ago. They're not making the same revenue they were a couple of years ago, or it's feeling a little more challenging. This is aside from whatever's going on with a recession or not a recession. I think which is helpful for us to understand, and this is aside from like whatever is going on in our industry in terms of some of the shadiness that I think might be happening. I think some of what we just want to understand is some of this is simply a supply demand situation in which and some of this is also simply that some people just really blew up during that time, which is wonderful and beautiful because of the need and demand. And there might simply just not be the same demand or need. And that doesn't mean that they're bad or wrong or screwing things up. That is just simply what's going on in our online economy. And I think knowing that can be helpful because then sometimes what happens with, and I've been supporting clients with this, it's very easy to solve the wrong problem or to compare and see, well, like, there must be something wrong because numbers were doing this 2 years ago than what they were doing now. But we also have to look at what the industry was doing 2 years ago. And that way you can make smart adjustments and smart adaptations, and as opposed to being really reactive. I don't want to go too long down that rabbit hole because I have some like actual mindset practical things here, but I just want to help everyone understand kind of what's going on. And just I think what can be helpful here is to also just level set expectations and to see that, again, not bad, not wrong, not good. It just is what it is, and that is just the way markets work. When COVID was happening, if there was one restaurant that was giving me takeout food and everything else was closed, they probably got all of our business. That isn't even necessarily a good thing, right? That overtaxed many places, but supply and demand. Now that the world is open again and I have, all these different restaurants to choose from, I'm probably not going to order from the same place over and over again. I'm probably going to vary that up. That's not because that business sucks. It's not because their marketing sucks. It's not because their sales sucks. It's not because I don't want to buy their food. It's simply that I have more options available to me. There is, there's more supply than there is demand, and well, judging by how much I'm seeing people eat out, there's a good match there. But I think that's, again, just helpful for us to understand what's going on. And I think if anything, what I think this lends itself to is an opportunity if we're then seeing, oh, like there's a difference in supply and demand here. And there's also possible talk of some stuff going on in our industry and also possible talk of a recession. How can I see this as an opportunity to make sure that my business, my service, my messaging, my marketing, my delivery, my client care is at its top, that we're at the top game, so that if there is such an offer of supply, I'm the supply someone is going to want to buy from, as opposed to, this means that I suck or I'm doing something wrong, or I don't understand what's wrong because my numbers are down from before, a couple of years before. This is probably why, and I would offer this gets to just be an opportunity to really focus on then how can you be the best option of the supply to meet the demand that there's still plenty of. It's just probably not the same it was a couple of years ago, or that ratio has probably changed. So hopefully that makes sense there. The other piece of this, and I think this is all part of the same thing, is, and then with that, just remembering that we then also saw so many people move into the space that weren't here before. So that's why there's also more supply, right? It is simply more saturated. Again, that isn't a bad thing. I use this example all the time, but down the street for me, there's a street that's really popular, and there's 3 or 4 pizza restaurants. 3 of them are on the same block. There's 1 or 2 more that are within a block radius. It's not like because there's so many pizza places, none of them get enough business. If anything, they're all thriving and all support one another because one person sees pizza from one place and is like, oh my God, I want pizza. They're full. So they go to the next place, right? Like having more of the same just makes everyone think pizza, pizza, pizza instead of a hamburger. And so they're all thriving, and in many ways they market one another. So it is more saturated for most of you with whatever your niche is. And don't forget, that doesn't have to be a bad thing. That means you're also all educating the market as to why pizza instead of a burger, and that can be really beneficial to make pizza the food everybody wants instead of a burger. I'm not hating on burgers, but just with this example here. So that doesn't have to be a bad thing. I think it's just helpful to understand so we can look at this neutrally, so you know what action steps to take, so you know what's going on. Because I think where this becomes really detrimental is when we don't understand, or we set expectations up that get us in our head, or we create stories that aren't based on facts, that aren't based on reality, that aren't keeping us neutral. This is when I talk so much about managing your mind. This isn't about like how do we have false positivity and like, oh my gosh, I'm going to make $1 million and I'm going to be the person who's a millionaire when I'm super stressed about money. I mean, please say you're going to be a millionaire, but I think sometimes we just think managing your mind means plastering on a fake affirmation when maybe it's feeling stressful in business, or maybe you're wondering why it's taking longer to bring in a client, or the customer journey is feeling longer. And I think instead what can be really powerful is to think, no, wait, actually I'm super neutral. I'm a CEO. What I get to see is just what's going on in the industry, what's going on in my business, what's actually true. When I can manage my mind around this and not get all jacked up around this, and I'm not creating stories around this, and I'm not spinning myself out, and I'm not in fear, and I'm not in worry, then I don't make decisions that aren't really serving my business. Then I don't do silly things like kind of spray and pray or create new offers that don't make sense or slash my prices when that doesn't make sense. Then I can just really neutrally show up like a CEO to make decisions that serve my business instead of letting the fear worry monger spin me out. So I think knowing all of this can be helpful for that reason. I'm just seeing if we have any questions. Y'all are very quiet, but let me know if you do have questions. The other thing on this more practical kind of like economics 101, I guess it would be economics, not economy. It shows you that I did not actually show up to these classes in school. I don't even know the name of them, but I know these topics very well, that I think is helpful to speak to because, again, this is just a conversation I'm having with clients. I'm having this with at least one client a week, and I've had this with so many peers as well. And these are the conversations happening behind closed doors. And I am just seeing from so many people where it is just to normalize. I think customer journeys have extended for some of the reasons we're talking about. And there's other factors as well. And part of this is there simply is more supply. I think some of it is some of the lack of trust, specifically in the coaching industry. And I think there's a lot of stress around business and sales and bringing in clients and making money and retaining money right now. So I want to speak to a couple things. And I think part of what's also feeding that is inflation is real, and there's so much talk about a recession. And I think if you ask most people, they don't even know if we're in a recession or not. Again, not an economist here. This is from my experience and then from what Google's telling me. According to Google, when I set up this email, we aren't in a recession. And I just want to say that because, and then I'll explain what a recession actually is and why it's not as scary as it sounds like. I know I talked about this a year ago, but I think it's worth repeating. Why this is so important to understand and to know and to be able to tell your brain is the second we start telling ourselves the story, we're in a recession, the economy is really funky, everything's really hard, people aren't making money, there's inflation, right? We start getting into fear. I called it fear city during COVID, fear and scarcity. We start getting to scarcity. We start telling our brain we're Chicken Little, right? The sky's falling in. We start telling our brains to look for evidence that there is a recession, that sales are going down, that there isn't money, right? We're really feeding our brain, this is the narrative, this is the parameter I want you to look at business through. This is the parameter I want you to run your business through. We get into a very reactive, self-protective way of making decisions, showing up and taking action, versus and I'm not saying bury your head in the sand if we are actually in a recession or if there is actually something financially to pay attention to in your business. But a lot of times when we look historically, where a lot of challenges happen with something like a recession is if we look at, let me explain this first. What I think is actually helpful to know is with a recession, all that means is that there have been 2 quarters in a row of slowing growth in the economy. And by the time someone has announced we're actually in a recession, that means we've already been in a recession for 6 to 7 months, and the average recession lasts for 11 months. Meaning by the time someone actually tells you, hey, we're in a recession, you should freak out, you've already been in it for 6 months. So your reality hasn't actually changed from the time they've told you. Like, you've already been in that reality for 6 to 7 months, and you're already halfway through it, meaning you're already on the latter half of it being done if the average recession lasts about 11 months. And historically, recessions in our economy really do a lot to reset things like inflation. It's actually a very good thing. It helps create a healthier economy. If we didn't have recessions, the inflation we're all experiencing, things would just keep ballooning. So it can actually be a very healthy thing. They tend to only on average historically last 11 months. They aren't announced until we've already had those two slow quarters. So that's 6 to 7 months again. So when you hear this, you've already been in it for 6 months. But what happens is as soon as we hear that, even if for the last 6 months you've been fine, your brain says, oh my gosh, we need to freak out. We need to worry. Everything is wrong. Everything is bad. And this is the lens you start thinking and running your business from. And that's when we can actually create a lot of problems. And I probably shared this in last year's live stream, but I'm sure everyone has seen, oh, what's the Christmas movie? It's a Wonderful Life. Is it It's a Wonderful Life? When there's fear mongering, and so then there's a run on the bank because everyone's freaking out that there's no money, and so that fear mongering causes everyone to freak out. Everyone wanting to freak out wants them to go and take their money out of the bank. We've been seeing this with some banks recently, right? We had this, what was this, just a couple weeks ago, and then everyone tries to grab out their money. Well, the way banks work is they don't keep all their money in stock, right? We don't need to talk about how the banking system works. That's a conversation for another time, but then that draw will actually cause a bank to shut down and the bank system to collapse. That's why we now have banks that are FDIC insured. Actually, the one thing I think that's probably worth saying is if you are someone who has, I think it's over $250,000 in assets in your bank, probably worth splitting into multiple accounts because you're only protected up to a certain amount. But again, I'm not a financial advisor, but I think there are certain things that are helpful to know and to make sure you're protecting your assets. But what's really fascinating with something like recession, the reason I'm bringing this to you here is what we can see is really where the big challenges happen, the run on the bank, what collapses a bank, what collapses our economy is not actually what was initially happening, where probably what we were doing is really resetting an economy. What happens is everybody freaks out. There's fear mongering. People get into scarcity. People worry that I'm not actually going to be protected, so I need to take what's mine because there's not going to be enough to go around. People start making decisions that are very based on survival in the moment. And that is actually what creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's what actually creates the problem. That's what we saw in It's a Wonderful Life if you saw that movie. I'm sure many of you know what I'm talking about. So that's the reason I want to share this here is I think the more we can see actually recession isn't as horrible as it sounds. It's just a word we've learned to associate a lot of crap and scary, hard things with. A recession is also not a depression, right? I think most people hear recession and think the Great Depression, not the same thing. And I'm going to keep saying this just so you can hear this. A recession, all that means is 2 quarters back to back of slow growth. And that means that we've just had some slow growth, right? That's when it gets announced, and that most recessions last on average 11 months. I don't know, according to my stock market, I think our economy is already turning around, whatever is going on, because my stocks have gone up, if that's any indication of things. So by the time you hear of anything, you're already halfway through it. But the really important thing I want you to hear there is not even that you're already halfway through it, but however you were feeling, however you were financially, however scarce or abundant you felt the day before you heard someone say it's a recession is the same reality for the day someone told you, because again, that's what's been going on for the last 6 months. They just can't announce it until after that. That's just when it technically becomes something they can announce. So if you were okay a couple days ago, then you would be a couple days after that. And that's really the mindset. Your job with this is to really see, how can I remain neutral? How can I keep my eyes on my own paper? How can I, yes, make smart strategic decisions with my finances, but how can I really understand what's going on here so I'm also not making that run on the bank when I really don't need to, and actually feeding into the fear mongering, feeding into the very things that can create a self-fulfilling prophecy of something that is actually going to harm the economy, instead of really seeing how this can actually be beneficial. And the other thing that I really like to think about with something like this, whether it's and this is a good place to pivot and to just talk about the mindset side of things, and we'll talk about some of the practical pieces here. But I think with something, whether we're in a recession or not, whether it's simply that there's a supply and demand imbalance in our industry, right? And so that there's just more supply than there is demand right now, if that's really more what we're looking at. And I think that's probably more the case than the fact there's a recession, plus there's, I think, a little bit of mistrust, right? I think that's maybe more helpful to understand, again, so that we're aware of, we're not turning a blind eye, but so that we can solve and address the right problem. But with something like a recession, what I like to think of is, but recessions are also when more millionaires billionaires, whatever the stats are made. And the reason for this is because people who can manage their mind and not fall into the fear city, not fall into that really reactive mode, not get into hoarding or scarcity, what happens for those people who are managing their mind is I think they really see the opportunities that open up. A lot of times what this means is there is a need for correction. There is a need for a reset. There are often new needs. There are often opportunities for improvements. There are often opportunities for blue oceans to be created. There are often solutions to problems that need to be made. I think that is definitely something we saw during COVID. Aside from what we're talking about with supply and demand, I think we also saw innovation. We saw there were needs, a whole new marketplaces created new niches, created new offers, created new products. There were new needs that were made. And so if you can maintain a neutral mindset, if you can allow yourself to really remember that you're a CEO and that is some of your work is to know how to manage your mind, it doesn't mean you can't be human. It doesn't mean you can't have fear. It doesn't mean that, you can't go get your support around any of what your mind needs so that you can get to neutral. But if you can do this, what I like to think about is like, how can this be a time that you really get to see as an opportunity to thrive? And the two things I think about with something like this. So when COVID hit, and I probably shared this with you all before, and this is similar to just what I'm seeing in our economy right now, what I'm supporting clients with. If we are in fact in a time where there is more supply than there is demand, this is going to happen, right? And then that's going to flip the other way, that this is just how economies work. This is just how markets work. But how can we, as the CEO of a business, decide that this gets to be an opportunity and this gets to be the time where we are going to rise to the top? I remember when COVID hit, and that was on me. I just lost my father. It's not like that was, I think for all of us, that was a very challenging. I was in the epicenter here. But I remember very consciously deciding, drawing a line in the sand and deciding, hey, this is a time that I can show up and be of service, or this is a time that I can freak out and add to the worry mongering. And I just decided, drew a line in the sand. I was like, look, I had no idea did not know my business was going to double that year or triple or whatever it did. It wasn't even about the money, but it was about the mindset of I'm going to be someone who adds positive. I'm going to be someone who is of service. I'm going to be someone who's coming up with solutions, who's solution oriented. I'm going to be someone who's really focused on what are the things I can control here? How can I control those? How can I show up my best? How can I be a beacon? How can I be a light? How can I be a leader during this time? Versus how can I just give into the worry, into all of these thoughts that really don't serve me or anyone else at all. And so I think this is an opportunity to make a decision like that. And again, we're not in a recession. This is a time where there's just a supply and demand imbalance, maybe is the best way to think of it. But instead of seeing that and thinking like, well, this means it's not going to work for me, or now I need to worry about all of the reasons, instead of getting down that mindset, because what you focus on expand, and it's very tough to come up with creative solutions. It's very tough to also be in the energy that compels someone to want to hire you when we're in that mindset. Instead, how can you make a decision, a line in the sand where it's like, this gets to be my time? If that's the case, that still means that there is a demand. That still means there are people who are investing. It still means that there are people who need my service. How can I show up and just see, this is a time where I get to double down being of service. This is a time I get to double down and refine my messaging, my marketing, my sales, my delivery, my service. This is a time I really get to show up and I'm going to be one of the people that is that supply that people want. I'm going to be one of the people that thrive during this time. And that really is a decision you get to make. And I know whenever people talk about decisions, it's almost like the most annoying. I think my clients eye roll me sometimes. It's like, okay, Kim, I'm just going to make a decision. But the truth is it starts with the decision, because that's going to tell your brain where to focus. And it is such a different way as a CEO to decide, right? This is one of the few things you have control over. Control is delusion, but one of the things you do have control over is what you decide, and what you decide gets to be true for you, what you decide you're going to focus on, what you decide you're going to show up for. I invite you to decide the things that are really going to serve you, and I decide you to make the decisions that are really going to support you and to see those opportunities. I don't know if this sounds screwed up, but whenever something like this happens, just because of we're not in a recession, but what's going on with our economy, I just think, well, I mean, that this is normal. This is how economies work, but this is an opportunist. This is a really great time to look for opportunity. I talked about this during COVID, That is like, I wonder if I can find the live stream. There's a very big difference between being opportunistic and noticing opportunity. Opportunistic is taking advantage of people. Opportunistic is when we had COVID and people needed toilet paper and people needed masks and people needed medicine. If you were selling that and you price gouged and you hoarded things to create a false sense of scarcity, that's opportunistic. We are a big no for that. We are a big, like, that's not cool, that's slimy, that's gross, we don't like that. But seeing opportunity, that is part of being a business owner. That is part of being a CEO. And I think what makes really great entrepreneurs is seeing opportunity where other people can't, right? Seeing solutions where other people can't, seeing innovation when other people can't, because other people are wrapped around the fear and this is impossible and this can't happen. And an entrepreneur, CEO is like, what's the opportunity here? What's the solution here? How can we make this better? How can we serve, right? And so the opportunity, we use COVID as an example, is if you saw, oh, there's a shortage of masks and we make t-shirts, but we could turn our factory into make masks, that's an opportunity. We can sell them at a very fair price, but people need those right now. There is a need and there's a shortage of supply, right? There is a demand, there's a shortage of supply, there's an opportunity here. That's a need we can meet. We're gonna make those, we're gonna sell those, we're gonna make money. We can still be of service. This is serving people. It is very fair exchange, but we get to make money from that, right? That is seeing opportunity versus being opportunistic. That is thinking like a CEO. That's being an entrepreneur. And that's my invitation to you with whatever is going on in our economy. We have microeconomies. We all do in our online space, but even within your niche, even within probably your community. I really invite you to practice cultivating that mindset because that is how you thrive no matter what is going on in any economy and in any world. And I really invite you to play with, again, not opportunistic, but what is that opportunity? And to really play with the belief set and embodying where it's like, I'm an entrepreneur. This is what we do. What we do is when everybody else is losing their mind, we are the people who decide to show up and lead. We are the people who decide to show up and problem solve. We are the people who decide to show up and serve. We are the people who decide to show up and come up with solutions. And because of that, we get the money, the monetary benefit on the other side. So I think if you can think about it that way, it's almost not even about the money. It's about or money is the byproduct. It's about that way of thinking and showing up, but that is also what always generates revenue, right? That's how you become one of the supplies that is going to thrive. I also see this as, this sounds, I always say this sounds screwed up, but this is, I'm just trying to be as transparent as possible. I was talking about this with a client the other day, and we were talking about a couple challenges that were actually coming up for one of her clients. Oftentimes I'm also supporting clients with coaching their clients, so it can kind of like go ripple out. And what we were talking about, I was like, of course we can have compassion for someone going through some challenges, but I said in many ways this is the best thing that could have possibly happened to your client, because now they're really aware of exactly the things they need to address and the patterns and what needs to be addressed in their business so they can get the results they want. Whereas if they hadn't hit an air quote rock bottom or gotten down, so had things struggle so much, they probably could have just kind of coasted with a lot of things. And so sometimes when it's a little more challenging to book clients, when it's a little more saturated in the online space, not that I wish challenge on people. However, sometimes the silver lining to challenge is it forces all of us as business owners to take a look at, well, what are some of the things maybe I've been coasting on that I could coast on when there was just an influx of demand and it was sort of like we were all just serving as much as we could, that maybe now is the opportunity to look at how can I dig in and refine that and improve that that's maybe just been ignored for a while. And again, I think that's just sometimes when we want to see challenges like this is the worst thing ever, or if a client's going through a challenge, that's the worst thing ever, as opposed to how is this an opportunity to identify the exact right problem to solve that probably has been there all along. There just hasn't been a need to pay attention to it as much because, again, there's just been far more demand than supply. So I personally have... trying to think of how to say this so that y'all are going to think I'm crazy, but I'm very grateful. My business has continued to thrive, but I also, during whatever we want to call this season, the oversaturation season in our industry with our microeconomy in the online space with more supply than demand, I also see this as such an opportunity as a business owner. I've been geeking out on great. Well, during COVID, I overbooked myself at one point. So I definitely was not looking at things like my sales pages or my email funnels. There was a lot of stuff in my business that was working just fine. There was placeholder content, as we've talked about, that I just wasn't paying attention to. And I see all this as an opportunity where I'm like, great, this is an opportunity for me to go in and refine and update some of those things to really raise the quality, raise the standard of everything in our business, because I've already decided we're sustaining and or thriving during this time and also next year and the year after that and year after that. So if that's a helpful mindset to take on, that's one of the ways I personally think about it. The other piece here, and then I'll share some of the practicals. The other piece that I think is maybe helpful to think about with business, I know I talk about this in different ways, but I think just remembering with whatever's going on in our microeconomy, whatever's going on in the industry, whatever this month, this season is, it really invites you to take a long game view, a long game lens with your business, and to remember that you're going to have different seasons in business. Your revenue is not going to be a straight line. Of course, we want you to sustain and have reoccurring revenue and to have it, not fluctuate like massively, but there is going to be a normal fluctuation. And I think the more you can create safety around that, a normalcy around that, and the more that you can also see your business as seasons that make up years and years, as opposed to just this simple micro moment. I think the more spaciousness you can create to ride any wave in business, for every business, even like forget what's going on in our industry, forget what's going on in our microeconomy. Just because you are a human that's going to have different life experiences, you're going to have different numbers, different waves that you're riding. You're going to have seasons where, let's say you're having kids or you're pregnant, or I have a really good girlfriend right now who's she's on maternity leave, right? Her business is in a very different season than it was 11 months ago, right? Or 2 years ago. And it will be again in 2 years from now. And I think sometimes what we do unintentionally as business owners, and I'm always talking with clients about this, is we expect everything to be the same, no matter what season, no matter what the economy, no matter what's going on. We expect it just to be a straight line, right? Or very little variation. And we give very little room for any ebb and flow. But that's not how business works. If you invest in the stock market, you literally know that's not how business works. You can see how the stock market has lines that go up and down. Ideally, they go up over time. Sometimes there's a big dip and then it rebounds. And if you look at businesses in the stock market, not just month to month, but year to year, like decade over decade, of course, the overall trajectory is up, but you can see sometimes there's a whole year where a business has been down and then it's bounced up. And so that's what happens with markets, with business, with economy, but that's also what happens with us as humans. If I think about when my dad was sick and I was spending time at home with my dad, my business sustained. I served my clients very well. We made reoccurring revenue, but my business did not have its biggest months then. I did not push to book a whole bunch of extra clients then, because I wanted to spend that extra time with my father. And I just share these as examples because I think sometimes we just forget these things and we expect everything to be the same or everything to always go up. And I really want to invite you to take a longer term view and to think this is one dot of many dots over 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years in business. And those little micro ebbs and flows are just normal, but I always like to think, how much is a micro ebb or flow really going to make a difference 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And what I think is helpful that I can share is what I've seen at this stage in business. And one of the reasons I don't feel any need to push to make more money faster, and I'm very happy with revenue share as my business model, is I'm very aware that, and I know this is a very privileged thing to say at this stage of business, and I'm very blessed, but I'm very aware that making more money at this stage is going to be nice, but it's going to make very little difference or impact on my life. Just like making a little less money wouldn't be ideal, but it's going to have very little impact on the day-to-day of my life. And I think the more you can start to notice that and settle into that, the more you can ride those waves, as opposed to putting unfair expectations on yourself on whether it's a season because of supply and demand or the economy or the industry or your personal life, that just aren't really fair, or that would ask you to either burn out or to make decisions that wouldn't serve you in your business. So I think the more we can hold that, the more sustainable and the more long term you can have results. Because what will, I think, 5 years, 10 years from now really impact people more is if you get burnt out in a season, or if you decide shit, nothing's working, you completely throw your hands up in the air and stop showing up, or decide things are too hard and give up on your business. Those are the kinds of decisions, right? If you're not managing your mind or managing your expectations, that really can have a massive impact on the long term of your business. So we could do a whole other conversation about that, but that felt important to speak to. Did I have anything else I wanted to share there? I'm just seeing here. Just like I have way too many notes as usual for today's live stream. Okay, I do real quickly though want to just talk practical strategies a little bit. Things I'm talking about with my clients around this, since, you know, a recession or not, we're not in a recession, but we are seeing the supply demand change in our industry into some of the things we're talking about. There has been a threat of potential recession. We are also seeing inflation. There's you know, all the funky things that are happening. What are some of the things that you can practically do? And let's just pull that up. I think first and foremost, let's talk about some like grounded business money, real talk. I think what can be very helpful is two thoughts here. So first is picking up with what we were talking about with the long view lens of your business. I think one of the most challenging things for business owners, and one of the things I support my clients around a lot when I talk so much about your role as a CEO, right? This is one of your parts of thinking like a CEO and a business owner, is remembering that your business is not an ATM, and your business, as much as we are a business, and most of us build our businesses for financial freedom and the personal freedom and everything that gives us, if we just step back for a moment and we think about what a business is, what its role is, what its function is, and we think about being CEOs who run a business. And I know that sounds like so masculine and neutral, and I know most of us like love our work and our business, but just hang with me for a moment. If we just think about it that way for a second, our businesses aren't really there to serve our personal financial needs. That's just not the function of a business. It gets to, right? But most of us draw a salary from our business. It's not like our business makes money and then we make all of that money. And that's not actually why our business exists. That is the beautiful byproduct of your business, is it exists to solve a problem or to meet a need or desire for people through a product or service. That's why people pay you money. And then the beautiful byproduct, if you have a well-functioning, healthy business where you have profit margins set up, where you're not overspending or over leveraging or over investing on cost of good or product or service, then from that profit margin, part of that gets to pay you a salary, right? That's kind of like how a business works. So I say that just to remember that and to keep that in mind, because I think what can sometimes happen is, and part of what can create a lot of additional stress during times where maybe there's a supply and demand changes, we can start to forget that this is true and start to put a lot of pressure on business to not function like a business, but to function more like an ATM, or to function more like it's there to save you, or it's there to prove your worth, or it's there to prove you're going to be safe, or it's there to prove you're still going to be in business years from now, or it's a slot machine, or it is the stock market. I don't know. So what I would say is just keeping that in mind and seeing how can you create that separation and just remember the function of the business, because I think that can help a lot in terms of practically, like groundedly making decisions and financial decisions from your money, and even what you're paying yourself from your business. And if you take a look at what you're paying yourself from your business, what I would offer is, this is something I talk with clients about all the time. If your business isn't able to pay you what you need it to pay you, instead of putting pressure on your business to hurry up and make more money, especially when we're maybe in a season where, doesn't mean you can't make, I have lots of clients who are scaling right now, so I don't want to create that story at all. In fact, I have lots of clients who have no idea what's going on in the economy or in our industry, and this is talk about manage your mind and why I think it's so important not to feed into those stories. They're thriving, but part of the reason they're thriving is they're not buying into all the noise that they shouldn't be thriving. And I think that's just such great evidence. I can think of a few clients off the top of my head. They have not brought this conversation to me at all. And that's so either they know or they just haven't been paying attention to it. They're thriving right now. So it just goes to show you what you focus on really does expand, and it really changes. If you think it's going to be hard to make money right now, it just will be so much harder, as opposed to, of course, there's plenty of clients, there's plenty of money, there's still plenty of demand. There's just also a lot more supply. So we just need to be smart about how you are the person who's getting to be the supply people want to invest through or buy from. And I think it'll also just weed out some of the people who came in during COVID who wanted to test out the online space and who have found like maybe this isn't really their calling or their path, or there's something else they want to do, or there's an easier way for them, and it's just going to weed some of that out. And then I think it will self correct as economies, as markets usually do. Anyway, but I think just remembering that from your business. And so if your business isn't able to pay you what you want, of course, looking at what are the things your business needs to be able to increase profit margin and create sales. But I think it can also then be if sometimes those things can take a couple months, right? If we know that possibly customer journeys are taking a little longer, I know at least in my business, customer journeys are taking longer. I know for many of my clients that's the case as well. Not a bad thing. That just is. We've talked about that a lot, I think, on here. And if we know that maybe it's a little more saturated, and yes, there are things you can implement to speed up and to grow and to scale, but we know that most strategies take 90 days minimum, sometimes longer, to really play out. I think this can also be a place where it's like, great, so then how can I level set my expectations in terms of what my business is going to pay me? Not expect this to be like the season that I blow up and like quadruple my revenue. Not to say you can't, we don't want to create that story, but I think just level setting some of that, because I think, again, where people get themselves in trouble is they get so immediate. My business needs to pay me tomorrow. I need my business to blow up and scale, to triple next week so that I can pay for X, Y, and Z, instead of taking the long-term view of, my business is going to be around for years and years and years. I want to set it up to grow and scale. These are some smart strategies that we can implement to grow and scale. It's going to take whatever time it's going to take. In the meantime, if I need more revenue, either is there room for that in the business, or do I need to have revenue coming from somewhere else? I know that's not what anyone wants to hear me say, but that I think can just be maybe a helpful way to think about it. My video is doing that funny thing again, y'all. You'll have to let me know if it's doing that on your side. The other, just a couple other things here that I just on the practical side. I think on the other side, I would say is really, I'm encouraging clients to look at, what are the opportunities if it is super saturated in your industry. If we are noticing that that's the case, what opportunities do you have to create a blue ocean? What opportunities do you have to lean into your unique edge? What opportunities do you have to meet your market in a new way? What opportunities can you find? What solutions to problems haven't been met before? Really, how can you use this as a time to see, like, or even what opportunities are there within your marketing process? What are the things that maybe you wouldn't have leaned into 2 years ago because, again, there was just so much more demand. You were probably serving so many people that maybe now you have time, whether that's looking at the back end of your business or your systems and your processes, or it's looking at the way you're marketing, or looking at the way you're building and filling your pipeline, right? How can you look at what are those opportunities, or are there new challenges, problems, solutions you can solve in a new and different way? And then the last thing, I'm sure we talked about this last year, and I know for y'all watching, I know everyone is in such a different place in business. So some of you are looking to book your first couple of clients. Some of you are making 6, 7 figures. I know I work with people across the board, so I know what I'm sharing here might be frustrating to hear if you're starting your business. But I think one of the things we want to remember is, I Googled this. I don't know how exact this stat is, so take this stat with a grain of salt, but generally the top reason businesses fail is they run out of capital. They run out of runway and cash for operating expenses. The stat I pulled was 38% of businesses fail because they run out of cash. Again, I don't know the source of that stat and how accurate it is, but I think when we have supply demand kind of an influx the way we do, whether or not we're in a recession, when we look at business, I think one of the things we want to remember is it takes money to run a business. It takes money if you're investing in coaching, if you're investing in team support, if you're investing in advertising. Most businesses have operating expenses. If you create a product, the money it costs for that product, and it does take money to run a business, and it takes money to make money, as annoying as that is. And if we know that a lot of businesses, they essentially run out of cash flow, it's not because they aren't good enough, it's not because they don't know what they're doing, then we also know the right problem, so to say, to address to really make sure that your business gets to thrive when everybody else is losing their shit, so to say. And that is looking at cash flow and looking at how can you secure that. And so that's going to look different for everyone. If you're newer to business, that might mean looking at Do you want to get a line of credit? Do you want to get a second job? I know I worked a second job when I started my business. There is no shame in that. I have plenty of clients who do that. Do you want to tap into some resources so you know you have them available if you want to? I have clients and I have some peers I know who are at the $1 million plus mark who are securing lines of credit, not because they need it, but they also know if there is a recession and, if things do get tied up and it's harder to access money, also because it's usually cheaper to get a line of credit than it is maybe for the return you can get on investments. There's multiple reasons to do this, so there can be financial benefits as well, but many of them are looking into getting a line of credit as well because this, again, it's just being a smart, neutral CEO. It's not saying this is going to happen. It's not saying you're going to need it, but sometimes it can just be really helpful to know that you have that available to you. If you are in the space in business where you are generating profit and you've been in business for a second, you're generating that healthy profit, this might be a time to look at, do you have the reserves in place? And if not, do you want to start thinking about building the reserves in place to sustain some of the waves of business? I know so much, and this is like not the sexy thing. Everybody wants to know how to like leverage your money to manifest the beach vacation and to like buy the lifestyle. And look, I am here for some lifestyle. I love me some lifestyle. Y'all know I just bought me some art and I've gone on a bunch of trips this summer. I love, love, love spending money on lifestyle. And I also am a smart business owner and CEO. And I will tell you what makes my business feel really safe. And I think one of the reasons we're able to thrive and ride any wave in business, and something that also helps me know that we're going to be here long term, is before investing in lifestyle, we invested in supporting the business and making sure we had some buffers in place and just having enough put aside for personal and financial buffers, and not from a place like, oh, I think things are going to happen. We haven't had to pull on those reserves. I'm very grateful for that. But because of that, I also don't have to, I don't get into a scarcity mindset, and I don't make decisions in my business based on scarcity or based on, I'm not going to be able to pay my team next month. I know I can pay my team for months and months and months to come. And because of that, then I can really make smart strategic decisions in my business to serve me now and later, instead of very reactive decisions in my business. And so I know it's not the sexiest thing. I know, like, I really know it's not sexy. And if you hung out with me this long, this might be the place you jump off. But I do think this is thinking like a business owner and treating your business like a business, and really treating your business like the asset it is. And if we just know these are the stats, I know with mindset, we don't want to like think like bad things are going to happen. And I don't think we necessarily want to save money from the place of like, and if bad things happen. And if we also know that most businesses fail because they run out of cash reserves, it can also be such an abundant way of thinking, like, well, but I just know that my business is going to thrive no matter what. And one of the easiest ways I can set myself up to ride any wave is just to make sure I have some cash reserves in place. Because if I have cash reserves in place, I don't have to make drastic decisions or poor decisions. I can keep the engine running that's going to allow me to keep being one of the suppliers when there's less demand, that gets to keep improving what the quality of that supply is, so that I can meet the demand and be one of the businesses that thrive. I know it's not as sexy, but I think it is not only one of the things that can create safety for you, but it can also help you to continue to make really smart, neutral decisions in your business and continue to show up, or have your business show up the way it needs to be able to generate revenue. Whereas I think, unfortunately, what happens when we don't have different ways to resource the business, or ways to, it doesn't have to be that you have a savings account, right? It could be, again, that you got a line of credit, or that you got a loan, or that you picked up a second job. Literally did that for first couple of years in business. There's no shame in that. But when you have that coming in, you can also invest in the money generating action, the things in your business that help you to be one of the businesses that has a better quality product service, or that has marketing that stands out. So I think just seeing how those two go together, yes, it's a safety thing, but it's also so you can keep your business running the way it needs to be able to generate revenue in the first place. So those are some things I'm chatting about with clients. And again, I know it's not so sexy, but I would, and I'm not a financial advisor, you don't have to listen to anything I say, but you can take this on and just, see how that fits for you. For every smart business owner I know who's making multi-six figures or $1 million, actually, this is interesting. These are the circles I run in. I don't actually think this is very common outside of our circles, but the circles I run in, everyone is thinking this way and everyone is getting really clear on how many months of buffer does their business need, again, so that maybe no one needs it, but if so, their business can ride and they're not cutting corners, and they're also not operating out of fear or out of scarcity. And I mean, we're talking $2 million+ businesses, not, who are really thinking about this and being really smart about this. So if businesses at that level are doing that, I think it's smart for businesses at every level just to be thinking about, what does that look like and how can I set myself up for success that way? And again, if you don't have that set up today, you don't have to create it all today, but just starting to have that thought process. And if nothing else, seeing like, hey, maybe even the threat of a recession is making me think this way and making me think like a CEO in this way, so that when I have more influx, I can start putting some of that aside. Or so I can start thinking about not only spending money on lifestyle, which again, I'm all for. I love me some lifestyle money, right? But I'm also thinking about these other things that really set me up like as a sustainable business that feels really secure. You don't have to do the whole thing today, but might just be something to start thinking about so that you can even plant those seeds and start to build that over time. Okay, I think those are all the main things I wanted to speak to. I'm just seeing here if there was anything else in that I wanted to speak to before I hop off. I think those are the main things. I guess the last piece here, I think I said this, but I'm just gonna I will say for the majority of my clients, we're also, this is similar to last practical strategy piece, similar to with COVID. But definitely what we're thinking about right now is if it is more saturated, I think on just our strategy, this is the piece I was going to share earlier. So just on a very practical strategy piece, just something to think about as a business owner. If a market is more saturated, this is when we really want to think about things. I mean, we always want to think about this, but your messaging, your positioning, your unique selling proposition, what we call a blue ocean, right? How are you differentiating? And I think this is a time to really think about that if you haven't, to revisit that if you haven't. I have a free coaching call that we offer from time to time. I've actually been offering a different free coaching call right now, but since we're having this conversation, I will drop my message up-level strategy session below where we look at your messaging and we refresh it and up-level it so that you can really stand out. But this is one of the reasons why I would really offer, if you haven't in a moment, even if you have great messaging, when it is very saturated, your message matters, your point of differentiation matters, your niche matters. I think getting even more narrowed in and focused matters because there is just that much more for people to sift through, and otherwise it starts to feel very samey. And it's not that samey is bad, it's not that samey is wrong. Samey is just hard for someone to understand why to buy from you versus someone else. And when you can differentiate and stand out and create that blue ocean, have messaging that is unique to you and helps people understand why you, again, that's just going to help when there's a lot of supply. It's going to help people understand why you are the supply that they want to buy or invest from. So I probably should have led with that because I probably lost a few of you with some of the money savings talk, but that is the piece there, and that's a part I'm always supporting clients with, but definitely when we're just seeing oversaturation in the marketplace is something we're really getting clear on and making sure that everyone knows what their messaging, what their positioning is. So play with that. And I will drop the link for that free call below. So if you want to join me for that, I would love to support you. And we do have one coaching intensive this month open as well. So you can definitely sign up for the free call. But if you're interested in any of what we're talking about here, but specifically digging into more of your messaging, your positioning, how that works and shows up in your content strategy and your marketing strategy, taking a look at your sales process and really making sure all of this is serving you so that you are, or everything we're talking about, you are refining literally what's going to help you be the supply and the supply and demand chain that is standing out, that people want to buy from, so you are thriving when everybody else is losing their shit. I have a coaching intensive called Unapologetic Words That Sell. Those are exactly the things we look at. I'll meet you where you're at. We'll identify before the intensive what the biggest lever for us to pull at. Is it more messaging? Is it more positioning? Is it more marketing? Is it more your sales process? But we will take a look at those unapologetic words that sell for you and really helping you to stand out in that sea of sameness. It's one of my superpowers as a coach. It's what I did really well acting. I'm really great at getting into the mind of your ideal clients and thinking like them, but I'm also really great at words and helping you put words around that in a way that sounds like you, that your people will actually understand, and understanding a customer journey and buyer's journey so that you know, yes, the words to use, but really how to strategically set up a customer journey so you're nurturing people and you're bringing in the right kinds of leads that lead to right fit clients, not just building an audience that is like the person who was on Instagram who had like thousands and thousands and thousands of people and couldn't even sell a t-shirt, right? I don't really care. I mean, I care that you have lots of people, but I care more that you have the right people in front of you that you're nurturing that turn into those right fit clients who are ready to buy from you. So that is a big part of my coaching superpower, aside from the managing your mind, helping you to think and show up like a CEO, to run your business like a business. And that is what we do in that coaching intensive. So we have one of those available this month. If you're interested in that, I will drop a link for the free coaching call on the Message Up Level strategy session or consultation. You're welcome to join me for either. And then if you want to hear about that intensive, I can share that with you. I love to support whoever wants to snag that from me. And then we'll open up some of those in July as well. So if the June intensive gets booked, because we had one already booked, but if the other one gets booked, we can definitely look into July and August. All right, y'all, love you so much. I hope this was valuable for you. If you have questions, reflections, drop them in the comments. You know I love to hear your feedback. If there's more talk around this that you want me to dive into on another live stream, let me know, and I'll be back next week. Bye.